to Ukraine we go now, and Joseph Lindsley. Joe, I got to tell you, I feel a little guilty talking about these trips we're taking while you're there in Ukraine. Maybe one day you can come along with us.
Indeed, Bob, and I was happy to hear that you'll be going to Ireland, my ancestral homeland. So if I'm still here in Ukraine, if the victory is not achieved, I'll send you some recommendations for that trip. And maybe one day there will be a Black Sea cruise that will go to Odessa and the great spots along the Ukrainian coastline one day after victory. I'm talking to you today again from the city of Kharkiv. And, I'm about to leave the city. I've been here for about 10 days. This is my favorite place in the world. In the sense, I come here it's in a strange sense, I come here for a vacation. Not really vacation, but I feel recharged when I leave the city. And that might sound crazy because, at any given moment, missiles could hit, as they did fairly often the past week. But there is such a strong spirit here that it is more rejuvenating than for me going to a beach in Mexico or to some fancy European capital. And the restaurant that I'm in right now, I walked in preparing to catch my train after we talked today. And I asked my friend that owns the restaurant, how are you? And he says in Ukrainian, better than bad. So, hey, if you're better than bad, it's going to be okay. And I've also been on this trip. We had multiple missions delivering things, reporting. And we were joined by Jim Gamache from Chicago, who really has rallied so many listeners to this program to support Ukraine. And every day after we finish speaking, I get so many great text messages from Chicago through Jim. And Jim was pointing out that there was a few days ago during one of the missile strikes. There had been a strike during the day, and there was a strike around midnight. And in between, we were walking almost before curfew, the streets of Kharkiv, and it was sort of a surreal scene. There was a guy on a bicycle with this big contraption. He was selling illuminated balloons, like with twinkling lights. He'd been selling them at the park, and he was driving home. So he's driving by. There's no lights whatsoever at nighttime as it gets close to curfew. So you can see the stars. The city is totally dark. And a woman crosses the street, kind of rapidly walking. And she said we weren't speaking. So she didn't know we were from America. And she says in English, "It's a wonderful life." And not with sarcasm, but with just a sense of joy. She looked at us and said, "It's a wonderful life." And she kept walking. And an hour later, we would have yet another terrifying night. And that's so often the spirit that I see throughout Ukraine, but especially here in the city of Kharkiv, 30 miles. It's always astounding to consider, just 30 miles from Russia. Another friend of mine said recently here, do you think we're all going to win before we are killed?
Wow.
And, you ask these questions, sort of joking, but also there's a deep seriousness. And as I look at what's happening in the media and in the West right now, I wonder, it does seem a little bit like the West is losing its grip. We have these strange things that are happening in the Canadian Parliament. A few days ago, when President Zelensky was there a few days ago, there's a big controversy now because they honored a Ukrainian who was almost 100 years old, and it turns out he had served with the Nazis. When the Nazis and the Soviets were both fighting for this territory. Many people here were fighting both sides. Some fought for the Soviets, some fought for the Nazis, and others fought to keep both sides away. And it became a big controversy. And then we have the big debate, the tension with Poland over the grain exports. And then all of a sudden we get all these negative headlines, and they all come around the same time when President Zelensky was in the U.S. For the very purpose of trying to get more support. And very notably, Ukraine had the story that gets buried is that amazing attack last Friday. Ukraine, thanks to weapons from the West, Ukraine was able to destroy the command. And now, as the evidence emerges, they took out some of the senior leadership of the Russian Navy. It was an extraordinary move. And what has Russia been able to do since then? Because all of the fear of Russia is predicated that if you push Russia, that word people like to use, escalate. If you escalate, Russia's going to destroy everything. And I think what that precision missile attack on the Russian Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Sevastopol, Crimea showed is that there's great weakness within Russia. And so, but it's right at these moments when we get flooded with this negative propaganda and all these negative headlines. And everything I've seen about Russian propaganda, including down here, here on the ground, I think at the very least, we must be skeptical as we look at these headlines, and also remember to look at, what is Ukraine able to achieve? Right now, we also have many people raising questions about the cost of the war. We discussed the other day, the 60 Minutes report. Senator Mike Lee from Utah, a Republican, has been especially loud about this is costing too much. And as I keep saying, as we've talked about, the cost is much less than it seems. It's a valuation of old equipment. And, Bob, we talked about, you gave me advice to publish that story. And I do expect that tomorrow at Poland, a Polish website in English, tvpworld.com, I will have a story about this. But for some reason, in English-speaking media, or in American and British media, it's been difficult sometimes for me to tell these stories. And I, except for there's the Spectator magazine, which Boris Johnson used to edit. I write for them once a month. But to tell these real stories from on the ground otherwise has been difficult. And this, when I'm here in Kharkiv, I'm 30 miles from Russia, as I said. We could get hit at any moment. In fact, usually the missiles hit before the air alarm goes off, right? So there's no moment of real safety. And so I can speak very freely. And I wrote a story for Notre Dame magazine, my alma mater, my university, in the Chicagoland area, here on the ground in Ukraine. I've been here every single day. I haven't left. And they turned it down. And in a very nice note, we feel bad for you. You're in a horrible place. But the one thing that I don't have any qualms about quoting this because of where I am in this free country with free speech. But the editor said, I had mentioned a bit of my backstory, the world that I came from. My first job at the Weekly Standard, the magazine that pushed for the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I was protege to Roger Ailes, the people who thought they could manipulate public opinion, people who liked wars. And I was part of that for a while until I escaped. And I told some of that story, and the editor of Notre Dame magazine says, readers don't need this backstory. We just need to know what's happening day to day. But my point is exactly, we need to look at the backstory. How do we get to here? Mm-hmm. And through that, maybe we can see, why the West is not sending the weapons. We talk a good game about it, but are we actually doing what it requires for victory? I know these people. I know the games they play in Washington supremely well. And so I will keep trying to tell those stories. And it was very notable, Pope Francis, who has not always, Ukrainians, there's many Catholics in Ukraine, and so they have a respect for the Pope, but they've been annoyed sometimes. He's tried to say, well, he tried to do a Stations of the Cross where there was a Russian and Ukrainian holding hands. But Pope Francis, maybe he's having an awakening. He said a couple of days ago, talking about the weapons and for Ukraine, and it is very notable. This came from the Pope. He said, we should not play games with the martyrdom of these people. We have to help them resolve things. I see now, and this suggests, and maybe he's changing his mind, I see now that some countries are moving backwards, not wanting to give Ukraine arms. A process is starting in which the martyr will certainly be the Ukrainian people, and that is an ugly thing. And this is amazing that it's coming from the Pope. But very notably, when Reuters, the news service Reuters reported this, here's what they said. The Pope said he did feel, quote, some frustration, and then the Pope, began randomly talking about the arms industry and the war. And I think if you actually listen to the Pope and everything I know about the arms industry, the Pope was not randomly talking. He's right on the money, and everyone else wants to ignore the real facts.
Joseph Lindsley in Ukraine, as always, we appreciate the stories of the remarkable people there and your perspective right in the middle of it since day one. And I don't want to slam your alma mater there, but I don't understand why Notre Dame would not want your backstory to be part of the article, because knowing where you're coming from helps us understand the perspective you have there. And now I'm glad Notre Dame lost to Ohio State, Joe. We'll talk tomorrow. Stay safe,
Bob. Onward to victory until tomorrow.
There you go. Onward.
Thank you for introducing Ukraine on your social media pages. That's very important that much more people can get more information about the situation here and how everybody can help Ukraine to stay stronger and to save all the world.
Що він сказав?
Well, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Come on now. Oh, which side are you on?
На чиїй ти стороні?
Ебать.